I was 78 the afternoon my own son, Daniel, looked me dead in the eye and said, "Dad, maybe it's time you let me handle the finances. You're slipping." Slipping, that was the word he used, like I was some old floorboard in a rundown house. It was March 12th, 2022, a cold Saturday in Columbus, Ohio. I remember the way the sunlight hit the dust floating in my living room, little gold particles dancing like they were mocking me. My hands were shaking, but not because of age. No, it was the anger, the kind that starts in your chest and climbs your throat. "You think I don't know what's happening?" I asked him. He gave me that crooked little campaign smile of his. He wasn't a politician, but he sure practiced like one. "Dad, you forgot to pay the electric bill again. You mixed up your pills. You told me the same story 3 times last week." "You asked me the same damn questions 3 times, I shot back. His tone softened in that fake way of his. "Look, I'm worried about you." But I knew what he was after. I'd seen the mail he accidentally left in my kitchen drawer, credit card debt, late notices, payday loan offers addressed to him. And the worst part, my retirement account balance scribbled on a notepad, circled 3 times. 68,224.17. He knew exactly what I had. And he wanted it. The thing is, you're probably thinking I confronted him right then and there. Told him to get the hell out of my house. That's what a younger me might have done. Back when I still worked at the Ford plant and my knees didn't sound like bubble wrap every time I stood up. But age teaches you something youth never can, the power of patience. So when he leaned in close and said, "Dad, people are starting to notice the forgetfulness. It might be time to get your affairs in order," I did something he never expected. I let my eyes drift away. I let my voice crack just a little. And I said, quiet as a mouse, "Maybe you're right, son." He smiled. Not a happy smile. A satisfied one. That's when I knew he'd walked right into it. See, Daniel thought he'd found a crack in the old foundation. Thought he could pry me open and drain what was left before anyone noticed. And he wasn't wrong. I had been acting forgetful, misplacing things, repeating myself. Because I wanted him to think that. The trap had started months before he ever asked for control of my accounts. Little things, small slips, seeds planted gently like a gardener who knew exactly where the vines would crawl. He thought he discovered my weakness all on his own. He didn't realize I'd created it. "You trust me, right?" he asked that day. "Of course," I said, forcing a tremble into my voice. "You're my only son." He placed a hand on my shoulder, trying to play the loving caretaker. "Then let me help. Let me take the stress off your plate." But I saw it. The flicker in his eyes. The hunger. People talk about wolves, predators, but the truth, it's the wounded ones you gotta watch, the ones who think the world owes them something. Daniel had always been that way, even as a boy. And on that March afternoon, as the furnace hummed in the basement and the smell of burnt coffee lingered in the air, he thought he'd won. He thought the money was his. He thought his father, his aging, slowing father, had finally slipped into the fog for good. But he didn't know the truth I kept tucked deep behind my slowing gait and my shaky hands. There's nothing more dangerous than an old man who's still thinking clearly and pretending not to. Because when you believe a lie long enough, it becomes real enough to destroy you. And Daniel, well, he was about to learn just how real my forgetfulness could be. Before everything cracked open, before the lies, the paperwork, the forged signatures, the dementia assessments, there was just me, my quiet little house on Folsom Street, and a life that made sense. I wasn't rich, not by any stretch. But after 38 years on the line at the Ford plant in Lorain, after 2 blown-out knees, a back that still stiffens every morning, and more night shifts than I care to remember, I had managed to build something steady. A modest pension, a small IRA I nursed like a houseplant, and that retirement account, the one Daniel had his eyes glued to, my safety net. I used to sit in my kitchen with a cup of Folgers, planning out the rest of my years. I figured I'd fix up the old shed, maybe take a fishing trip out to Lake Erie with my buddy Steve before he moved to Arizona. Holidays at my daughter Melissa's place in Dayton. Sunday evenings watching the Browns lose again while I pretended they had a shot. Life was simple, predictable, and I liked it that way. Daniel wasn't always the storm on the horizon. He was my boy, my only son. I still remember the smell of gasoline and summer grass from the day he learned to ride his bike in our yard, scraped knees, little helmet sitting crooked, him laughing like the world was his. That's the picture I kept tucked in my wallet for decades. Back then, I'd never have imagined he'd grow up to see me the way he eventually did. As a bank account with a heartbeat. It's strange, isn't it, how love blinds you? I used to brag about him at the VFW. My boy works in sales, sharp kid, always had ambition. Folks would nod, tell me I raised him right. If only they knew. By 2020, I started noticing it. Not big things, just changes. The way he stopped asking about my day and started asking about my accounts. The way his eyes scanned the living room, not like he was admiring the place but like he was taking inventory. He'd say things like, "Dad, you shouldn't be living alone. Dad, that 401k just sits there, you know. Dad, you can trust me." Harmless words on the surface. But you know how it is. The older you get, the more you hear meanings instead of sentences. And there was something in his tone, a tightness, a hunger that didn't belong in a son's voice. One evening, this was October 2021, he came over unannounced. I was making chili, the kind with too much cumin, the way my late wife used to make it. He sat at my table and watched me stir the pot. "Dad," he said, "have you thought about what happens if something happens to you?" I froze, spoon in hand. "Like what?" I asked. "You know," he said, waving his hand like he was swatting a fly. "Memory stuff, confusion, you've been forgetting little things." I hadn't forgotten anything. Not yet. But I let him talk, let him plant the seeds, let him believe he was the one steering the ship. Because months earlier, I'd found that notepad in his jacket, my retirement amount circled in red like some kind of bullseye. I found the overdue credit card bills in the trunk of his car when he asked me to help him unload groceries. I saw the way he flinched when the phone rang, how he stepped outside every time. I knew trouble when I smelled it. 40 years around union guys taught me to watch for the ones who were desperate. Daniel was desperate. And desperation makes people dangerous. But even then, even with all the warning signs, I still hoped I was wrong. I still hoped my boy wasn't the kind of man who'd pick apart his father's life for cash. You want the truth. That hope hurt more than the betrayal itself. So I let him believe the story he wanted to believe. The forgetful dad. The slipping memory. The little pauses in conversation. The repeated questions. The misplaced keys I purposely left in the freezer. The wrong date I wrote on a check right in front of him. Every act was rehearsed. Every slip was performed. He thought he was watching me fade. But I was watching him tight, the noose he didn't even know he was standing in. The moment that sealed it came one cold December evening. We were sitting in my living room, him on the sofa, me in my recliner. The news was on, some story about scammers targeting older folks. I remember him turning the volume down and saying, almost casually, "Dad, maybe you should let me manage your accounts, just until things stabilize." I stared at him, really stared. And he held my gaze without flinching. That was the moment I realized he wasn't just thinking about stealing from me. He'd already decided to. I nodded slowly, pretending to be confused. Maybe that would help. He exhaled in relief, a full-body kind of breath, like he'd been waiting months for me to cave. I sipped my lukewarm coffee to hide the smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. Because right then, I knew two things for certain. My son thought I was slipping mentally, and I was about to use that belief to bury him. I've heard folks say that betrayals happen all at once, like a lightning strike. That's a lie. They happen slowly, drip by drip, until the waterline is up to your neck and you're wondering when you started drowning. For me, the first real crack showed itself on January 14th, 2022, a Friday so cold the air felt like broken glass in my lungs. I'd just come back from the VA clinic, routine blood work, nothing serious, and when I stepped into my house, Daniel was already inside. Not knocking, not waiting on the porch, just inside. My stomach dropped. I hadn't given him a key. The living room smelled like his aftershave, cheap stuff that tried too hard. He was standing by the little oak desk my wife used to pay bills on, flipping through envelopes like a man searching for buried treasure. He didn't hear me at first, or maybe he did and pretended not to. "Daniel," I said. He damn near jumped out of his shoes. "Dad, Jesus, you scared me." "You let yourself in." He held up a key, twirling it between two fingers. "Melissa gave me hers, just in case." He said it like he was doing me a favor. Melissa never would have done that. She respected boundaries, and she sure as hell wouldn't hand over a house key without asking me first. I studied his face, the tight jaw, the restless eyes, and something inside me curled up cold. I'd been pretending to be forgetful for weeks, but he was acting like I already had one foot in the memory ward. "What are you doing with my mail?" I asked. He waved the stack in the air. "You forgot these. They were piling up." He hesitated. "Dad, you don't even remember putting them on the table." That was his new favorite trick, telling me I didn't remember things. I walked past him, my knees popping, and looked at the mail. Every envelope had been slit open. "Daniel," I said, "did you open these?" He forced a laugh. "Dad, come on, you must have done that." "I just got home from the VA," I said. "They weren't open when I left." There was a pause, a long one. He didn't apologize. Didn't explain. He just changed the subject. "Look," he said, "I brought you groceries. Thought you could use some help." "Groceries?" "Sure." That was his cover. But I let it go, played along. "Thank you," I murmured, letting my voice wobble a little. "I must have forgotten." His eyes lit up. Not with kindness, no, with confirmation. The same look a fisherman gets when the bobber dips below the waterline. Then he said it, soft but loaded. "Dad, we really should talk about power of attorney." The words hung in the air like smoke from a gun. I shuffled to the kitchen, making sure my gait looked unsteady. He followed like a shadow. The grocery bags were filled with microwave meals I didn't need, and 2 stacks of paperwork he tried to hide under a loaf of bread. I pulled them out, held them up. "What's all this?" "Just some forms, Medicare updates, bank stuff. I can walk you through it." I didn't say a word. He took that as an opening. "Dad, you're forgetting things. You're not keeping up with bills. You're mixing up your meds. What if something happens? You want me to be able to help, right?" I looked at him, at the son I raised. Baseball games, scraped elbows, late-night fevers, and all I could think was, he's rehearsed this, practiced it, planned it. So I let my hands shake as I set the papers down. "I don't know, Daniel, it's a lot." "It's okay," he said, reaching for my shoulder. "You can trust me." That was the moment I felt my heart crack in a way I hadn't expected. Not because he wanted the money, but because he truly believed I was too far gone to catch him. The next crack came a week later. I got a call from KeyBank about an account inquiry I supposedly made, only I hadn't called anyone. When I went in to ask about it, the teller said, "Your son already picked up the forms for beneficiary changes." I felt the room tilt. Beneficiary changes. Every instinct in me screamed to confront him, to shout, to demand answers. But rage is a young man's game. Instead, I nodded like an old man confused, patted my pocket like I'd lost my wallet, and said, "My son handles those things." The teller smiled warmly. She believed me. Everyone believed me. Daniel was building a case, piece by piece, that his father was slipping away. And every time I played confused, every time I let my voice trail off, his confidence grew. You might think that hurt. It did. But what hurt worse was knowing that he thought he was smarter than me. That he thought senility would wash me clean like chalk on a sidewalk. He forgot who raised him. Forgot the man who taught him to drive, to change a tire, to fix a sink, to stand up straight. He forgot that I'd survived factory layoffs, chemo scares, a heart attack, and burying a wife I loved for 51 years. A man doesn't live that long without learning how to read people, especially his own blood. The first cracks weren't in me. They were in him, in his lies, his confidence, his underestimation. And cracks have a way of turning into earthquakes. He didn't know it, but the ground beneath him had already started to shift. You can ignore a lot when it comes to your kids. You can excuse things, explain things, tell yourself they're stressed or confused or going through something rough. But there's a moment, a single, solid moment, when the truth steps out of the shadows and looks you straight in the eye. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You can't pretend anymore. For me, that moment came on February 3rd, 2022, at exactly 2:17 p.m. inside the KeyBank branch on East Broad Street. I remember the smell of winter on my coat, the wet slush melting on the floor, the sound of printers humming behind the counter. I walked in hoping, praying, really, that the changes the teller mentioned earlier were just a misunderstanding. Maybe Daniel had been close to slipping, sure, but maybe he hadn't crossed the line yet. Hope's a funny thing. It keeps you alive and blinds you at the same time. I went up to the counter, asked the teller, sweet young woman named Kelsey, if I could review recent account activity. She typed my info into the computer, smiled politely, then paused, her eyebrows pulled together. "That's strange," she murmured. My stomach tightened. "What's strange?" She clicked a few more times, her eyes scanning the screen. "Sir, you're here to sign the rest of the documents, right?" "Documents?" I asked. "Yes," she said, turning the monitor slightly toward herself. "The ones your son submitted last week. Power of attorney, beneficiary adjustments, automatic transfer setup." "Transfer," I repeated. She nodded, not realizing the earth had just cracked open under my feet. "Yes, a scheduled monthly withdrawal of $4,200 starting next month, to your son." The room blurred for a second. The lights seemed too bright. My ears started ringing. "I never approved that," I said quietly. She gave me a soft, pitying smile, the kind people give old men who can't remember their own names. "Sir, he submitted the preliminary forms. He said you'd be in today for the final signatures." "Did he?" I whispered. My vision steadied. My pulse slowed. Everything inside me, the nerves, the doubt, the hope, fell silent. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't desperation he'd talk himself out of. This was intentional, calculated, prepared. He wasn't waiting to see if I was slipping. He decided I was slipping. And he planned to empty my account until there was nothing left but dust and loose change. I shuffled back from the counter like a man twice my age. My legs felt heavy. My mouth tasted like copper. Kelsey asked if I needed a chair, but I waved her off. Could I have a printout?" I forced out, "of the forms he submitted?" "Of course," she said. "Let me get those for you." The printer spit out a few warm sheets as I stood there breathing through my nose, fighting the urge to slam my fist on the counter. She handed me the papers. I thanked her, tucked them into my coat, and stepped out into the cold. The wind hit my face, sharp and unforgiving. I walked to my truck, the old F-150 my wife used to joke would outlive us both, and sat behind the wheel. I opened the papers. And there it was. My son's handwriting. My forged signature. A note claiming I had memory impairment issues. And at the bottom, his request for the recurring transfers. When you see your own signature forged by the boy you raised, something breaks inside you, not loudly, quietly, like the soft crack of thin ice under boot. There were more details. He listed my medications, wrongly on purpose to make me look confused. He exaggerated my forgetfulness. He wrote that I needed help managing complicated finances. Complicated. I had 4 bills and a retirement account. The whole thing fit in a single drawer. And then the worst part, the one that hit me harder than everything else combined. Patient demonstrates early cognitive decline. Recommendation: grant son immediate authority. A lie. A manipulative, cold lie. I sat there in my truck for a long time, watching people walk past my windshield, breathing, thinking, "You're expecting me to say I cried." I didn't. The tears would come later, sure, but not then. What I felt was something heavier, older, a deep, quiet grief that settled into my bones like winter frost. Because in that moment, staring at the forged signature, the lies, the transfer request, I knew that the boy I raised was gone, replaced by a man who saw me not as a father, but as an obstacle between him and 68,224.17. And then another truth slid into place, cold and solid. If he was already forging my signature, then he was already willing to claim I wasn't competent, which meant he was willing to go further. A lot further. That's when the rage finally came, slow and steady, like a fire catching dry wood. But revenge isn't built from rage. Revenge is built from clarity. And as I sat in that truck, engine running, February wind clawing at the windows, I felt a clarity I hadn't felt in years. My son thought I was losing my mind. He had no idea how sharp I really was. He thought the trap was closing around me. He didn't realize he was already standing in a deeper one. And that forged signature, that was the moment I knew exactly what I had to do. You ever notice how betrayal doesn't hit you all at once? It comes in waves. One knocks you down, the next rolls you over, and before you know it, you're swallowing salt water, wondering which way is up. That's how February felt, one long cold drowning. After I found those forged documents, something inside me went quiet. Not dead, just quiet. Like the part of me that used to laugh at the weather report or grumble at the TV commercials just slipped into the back seat and let something colder drive. I didn't go home right away. I drove around Columbus with the heater blasting, the city sliding past in gray smudges. I went down Livingston, turned onto Parsons, circled around Schiller Park twice, not even looking at the snow-dusted grass. My hands were shaking on the wheel, not from age, not from fear, but from the weight of understanding. My own son was trying to erase me, one signature at a time. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the sun was already dipping low, giving the house that lonely orange glow it gets in winter. I sat there for a minute, listening to the engine tick as it cooled. Then I saw him. Daniel's car, parked right in front of my house, waiting for me. My stomach clenched. I wasn't ready, not after what I'd seen, not after reading lies about my mind on official paperwork like I was already fading into some fogged-over shell of a man. I stepped out of the truck anyway. My boots crunched on the icy driveway. Daniel got out of his car, hands shoved in his coat pockets. "Dad, I was just about to call you." His tone was cheerful, too cheerful. The kind of cheer someone uses when they're hiding a weapon behind their back. "Where were you?" he asked. "VA," I said. "Took longer than usual." A lie, but after what he'd been doing, I felt no guilt. He nodded sympathetically, studying me like a specimen. "You forget your appointment again." I felt that word slice into me, sharp, cruel, practiced. "No," I said evenly. "I remembered." He tilted his head. "Are you sure?" Melissa said. Melissa didn't say anything, I snapped, and his face flickered. I'd caught him improvising. He wasn't here out of concern. He was here to check if the bank had called me. "What you do today?" he asked casually. I shrugged, picked up prescriptions, had some lunch. Another lie. He didn't blink. He just kept looking at me the way someone looks at a door they're waiting to unlock. "You seem stressed," he said softly. "Overwhelmed. Maybe we should talk about those forms again." My hands balled into fists inside my coat pockets. I could feel the bank papers crinkling against my knuckles. "I'm fine," I said. He stepped closer, too close. "Dad, you're not fine. You're forgetting things. You're getting confused. You left the stove on last week." "No, I didn't." He leaned in, lowering his voice. "You're making this harder than it has to be." Harder for him, he meant. Not for me. He didn't see the shift inside me. Didn't see that something had snapped into place the moment I saw my forged signature. He wasn't talking to the confused old man he thought I was. He was talking to the man who raised him. The man who built his own life from union sweat and busted knuckles. The man who had nothing left to lose but his dignity, and wasn't about to surrender that for a single damn dollar. But I didn't show that. Not yet. I let my shoulders sag. Let my eyes lose focus just a little. "Maybe you're right," I muttered. He exhaled in relief. "Good, good. We'll go over paperwork tomorrow. I'll take you by the bank." My blood turned to ice. He was accelerating the plan. "Tomorrow?" I asked. "Yeah, the sooner we get ahead of this memory stuff, the better." Memory stuff. That's what he called the trap he was building. He left a few minutes later, patting my back like he was comforting a sick dog. "Try to get some rest," he said. "You've had a big day." When the door closed behind him, I collapsed into my recliner. The house creaked around me, old wood, old pipes, old memories, and for the first time since my wife passed, I felt truly alone. Not lonely, alone. There's a difference. Lonely is missing someone. Alone is realizing the one person you thought you could trust is the one person dismantling your life piece by piece. I sat there for hours in the dim light, listening to the refrigerator hum, thinking, planning, hurting. Around 10, Melissa called, my daughter, the one with the kind heart and no agenda. "Dad, everything okay? Daniel said you seemed off." There it was again. The narrative he was spreading. "I'm fine," I said gently. "You sure?" He said. "You missed your appointment." I closed my eyes. There it was, the lie-taking route. "Sweetheart," I said, steadying my voice, "you listen to me. If you hear anything about my memory, anything that sounds unusual." I took a breath. "Call me first, not Daniel." She hesitated. "Dad, what's going on?" "Not yet," I said, "but soon." The descent didn't stop there. Over the next week, Daniel kept checking on me, showing up without calling, telling neighbors I was having trouble moving things around the house to make me think I misplaced them. Once, he even turned off the breaker to the kitchen and claimed I'd forgotten to pay the electric bill again. It was like being slowly erased. Not in big strokes, little scratches, tiny smudges, each one making me look a little more faded. That's how elder financial abuse works. Not sudden. Not loud. Quiet. Creeping. Like mold you don't notice until half the wall is rotten. But here's the thing Daniel didn't understand. You can only push an old man so far before instinct kicks in. And survival. Survival's a powerful instinct. And that forged document in my jacket pocket. It wasn't just evidence. It was ammunition. I wasn't drowning anymore. I'd hit the bottom. And my feet had found solid ground. There's a moment in every old man's life when he realizes nobody's coming to save him. No cavalry, no heroic music, just himself, his aching joints, and the truth. My moment came the morning after Daniel tried to rush the paperwork. I woke up before sunrise, 5:12 a.m. to be exact, sat at my kitchen table with a mug of black coffee, and laid out every scrap of evidence I had. The forged signature, the transfer request, his exaggerated medical claims. My whole life reduced to a handful of papers spread across a table with a coffee stain shaped like Ohio. As the light crept through the blinds, I whispered out loud, "I can't do this alone." And that's when I started gathering the people who could help me, some expected, some not. But the first one wasn't a lawyer. Wasn't my daughter. Wasn't even family. It was Nurse Rosa. Now, Rosa wasn't technically my nurse. She worked nights at the VA clinic, petite woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a voice that could cut through fog. We talked here and there after appointments. She always called me Mr. Lawson, even after I told her to call me Harold. I didn't plan on involving her. But fate has a way of stepping in. 2 days after Daniel's pushy, "We'll go to the bank tomorrow," I went back to the VA to pick up medication. Actual medication this time, not something to trick my son. I was sitting in the waiting area when Rosa spotted me. "Mr. Lawson, you look pale, everything all right?" I opened my mouth to lie, to say I just didn't sleep well, but something inside me cracked. Maybe it was the way she looked at me, not like an old man but like a person who deserved answers. "Rosa," I said quietly, "can we talk somewhere private?" She took me to a small side room, fluorescent lights, metal chair, the faint smell of bleach. "Well," she asked, sitting across from me, "what's wrong?" I reached into my coat pocket, hands trembling, not acting this time, and laid the forged power of attorney papers between us. She read the first page. Her eyebrows shot up. "Your son did this." "He's trying to," I said. "Not yet, but he will." She flipped to the second page, her face tightening. "This says you have cognitive decline." "I don't," I said. "Not yet anyway." She kept reading, flipping pages with increasing speed. When she finished, she sat back in her chair, her mouth a thin line. "Mr. Lawson, this is elder abuse." Hearing someone else say it, someone who wasn't family, someone objective, it hit me harder than I expected. I swallowed, throat tight. "I need help," I said, "before he takes everything." Rosa didn't hesitate. "You need a lawyer and a paper trail." "I can't afford a lawyer," I said, "not the kind that can beat him." She shook her head. "You don't need a fancy one. You need an advocate, legal aid, APS, someone who knows how this works." I exhaled slowly. "Can you help me find someone?" "More than that," she said. "I can document your mental clarity. If he tries to claim you're impaired, we'll have medical proof you're not." That hit me deep. She was offering me something Daniel wasn't planning on. A witness. She printed out my recent cognitive assessments, signed them, stamped them with the VA seal, and handed them to me. "Keep these somewhere safe," she said firmly. "Somewhere your son can't access." I nodded. "Thank you, Rosa." She touched my forearm gently. "You're not the first, Mr. Lawson, and you're not alone." I didn't realize it until that moment, but my eyes were wet. Not from sadness. From relief. The next person, I gathered, was my daughter, Melissa. Now Melissa is the type who always thought she could fix things with a warm meal and a stern phone call. Tough, but tender. She came by that weekend with a casserole dish clutched to her chest. "Dad, you sounded different on the phone." We sat at the kitchen table. I told her everything, not the slow drip of it, everything. The forged signature, the bank papers, the false statements, the push for power of attorney. She went pale. "He did this," she whispered. I nodded. "Dad, why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I had to be sure," I said, "and because I needed you calm, not marching into his place with a baseball bat." She didn't deny it. "That girl has my temper." She reached for my hand. "Dad, I'm here, whatever you need." And I needed something big. "I need you to play along," I said. "Same as him. If Daniel says I'm slipping, you don't argue. Let him think you're buying the act." She stared at me for a long moment. "You're building something," she said softly. "A case." I nodded again. "And you're sure you want to go through with this?" "I didn't choose this," I said. "He did." She swallowed. "Then I'm in." The third person in my circle wasn't human. It was a small digital recorder. After Rosa's warning about needing proof, I drove to Walmart on Sunday morning, bought the cheapest voice recorder they had, $19.99, AA batteries not included, and hid it under the cushion of my recliner. The next time Daniel checked on me, I made sure the recorder was on. He came in with his usual performance, worried eyes, forced patience, the whole act. "You've been having trouble again, Dad," he said. "You don't remember, but you called me twice last night." "No," I murmured, eyes down. I don't remember." He smiled sympathetically, the predator's smile. "See, this is why the paperwork is important." Click. Every word captured. Then, as he turned away, he added, "Once the transfers start, you won't have to worry about bills anymore. I'll handle everything." Clicking. Evidence. He had no idea. He was digging his own grave sentence by sentence. But the most important part of any gathering isn't the people. It's the resolve. Something changed in me that week. The weight lifted. Not because the situation was better, but because I finally had direction. I had a circle, a strategy, a spine stiffening inside me like steel. Daniel thought I was falling apart. He didn't know I was just assembling the pieces. And soon, very soon, those pieces would build the trap he'd walk straight into. There's a strange kind of calm that settles over a man once he decides he's not going to drown. It's not peace, not even close. It's something sharper, like the quiet right before a storm breaks open the sky. That's the calm I felt the week I began setting the stage for Daniel's downfall. Not rage, not fear, just purpose. See, revenge doesn't come from anger. Revenge comes from preparation. And preparation, well, that's a slow, deliberate art, especially when your enemy thinks he's the one steering the ship. The first big step of the setup happened on February 14th, Valentine's Day, a date my late wife loved because she said the whole world looked softer in pink and red. Funny thing is, on the day dedicated to love, I began my march toward betrayal's reckoning. Daniel called that morning, voice syrupy sweet. "Dad, I'm picking you up at 10. The bank needs you to sign the updated forms." He said updated like it was something routine, something harmless, something an old man shouldn't question. I kept my tone small, shaky. "Okay, son, I'll be ready." He thought he'd won already. He thought I'd given up. I hadn't. As soon as he hung up, I reached under the recliner cushion and turned on the digital recorder. Then I tucked it deep inside my flannel, right against my chest. The microphone was sensitive enough to catch a whisper. It would pick up plenty. Before leaving the house, I also did something subtle, something Rosa told me to do. I placed my VA cognitive assessment paperwork, stamped and signed, inside a manila envelope marked taxes. I tucked it into the bottom drawer of my old file cabinet where I kept my marriage certificate and Army discharge papers. "Your son won't look there," Rosa had said. "Men who commit financial abuse rarely look for proof of competence. They assume incompetence." She wasn't wrong. Daniel arrived exactly at 9:59, punctual like a man eager to get his payday started early. He didn't bother knocking. He walked right in, brushing snow off his coat. "You ready?" he asked. I nodded slow, like the world was just a hair out of focus. "Takes me a minute." He sighed. "Dad, we've gone over this. You can't keep living like this. You need help." I let a small tremble slip into my voice. "That's why you're here, right?" His lips curved into a smile, tight, victorious. "Exactly." Click. Caught. On the drive to Key Bank, Daniel talked nonstop, explaining how the forms were routine, how he'd take the burden off me, how he didn't mind helping. Every sentence reeked of someone rehearsing, someone who needed me to believe the script. I glanced out the window as we passed Franklin Park Conservatory, the snow dusting the glass dome like powdered sugar. I used to take Daniel there when he was little. He loved the butterflies. I wondered just for a moment where that boy had gone. Then Daniel said, "Once I have access, I can set up automatic bill pay. You won't have to touch your accounts again." Clicking. You don't hear the recorder click, of course. But I felt it in my chest. Another nail in the coffin he was building for himself. When we reached the bank, he guided me toward the entrance like I was some fragile thing that might topple without a hand on my elbow. I played my part perfectly, slower steps, squinting at the door like I wasn't sure it was the right one. Inside, the bank was warm, with that faint smell of toner and dust. People moved quietly from counter to counter. A printer muttered in the corner. Daniel approached the same teller, Kelsey, and greeted her like they were old friends. "Hi again. We're here to finish my father's paperwork. Kelsey's smile faltered. Sir, we haven't finalized anything. We don't actually process POA forms without reviewing them thoroughly. Daniel's jaw tightened for just a second. Right, of course. He nudged me. Dad, come on. But before he could steer me to the counter, a man in a navy suit stepped out from a side office. Mr. Lawson, he asked, eyes on me, could I speak with you for a moment? Daniel stiffened. That's okay, he said quickly. I'm handling. The man cut him off gently. Bank policy requires we speak privately with the account holder. Daniel opened his mouth to argue, but I laid a shaky hand on his arm. It's all right, son, I said. Let me try to handle this. He stepped back reluctantly. The banker guided me to a small room with glass walls. Before he even sat down, I slipped 3 folded papers onto the table. My forged signature, the transfer request, the false impairment claims. The man's eyes widened slightly. Sir, did you authorize any of this? I looked him dead in the eye. No, I whispered, and my son doesn't know I know. He leaned forward, voice low. Do you want us to put a freeze on all non-essential actions on your account? Immediate flag for suspicious activity. Yes, I said, do it. And your son? I shook my head. Don't say a word, let him think everything is going to plan. The banker nodded, understanding instantly. Mr. Lawson will discreetly lock down the account, and you'll need legal support. I'm working on that, I said. When we left the office, Daniel looked at me expectantly. What'd he say? I gave him the answer he wanted. They're just verifying some things, I murmured. We can finish later. He looked relieved, almost smug. See, it's all coming together, Dad. You'll thank me soon. Click. Every lie captured. Back at home, Daniel left confident as ever. He thought he'd nudged me one step closer to handing over everything. But that trip to the bank, it wasn't for his plan. It was for mine. Because now the account was frozen. Now the bank was on alert. Now every move he made would trigger alarms. But the most important piece of the setup came that night around 9 p.m. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated before answering. Mr. Lawson, this is attorney Margaret Chen with Franklin County Legal Aid. Nurse Rosa contacted us regarding your situation. I'd like to meet. I felt a chill run down my spine, not fear. Recognition. The first real ally in the legal world had entered the stage. Ms. Chen, I said, I think it's time we talk. And just like that, the setup was no longer just a plan. It was a countdown. You'd think the execution, the real showdown, would happen in some grand courtroom with polished wood and a judge banging a gavel. But no. The beginning of Daniel's collapse started in a place much smaller, quieter, and far less dramatic. My own living room. February 23, 2022. 6:42 p.m. Funny how endings often return you to the very room where the damage began. Margaret Chen showed up exactly on time as I suspected she would. She was a small woman, maybe 5'2", with a presence that filled every inch of the space around her. Black wool coat, leather briefcase, hair pulled into a tight bun that said she didn't waste a second of her day. Mr. Lawson, she asked as I opened the door. That's me, I said. Call me Harold. Her eyes scanned me quickly, not rudely, just efficiently. You seem clear, present, oriented. Good, let's get to work. No small talk. My kind of person. We sat at the kitchen table, the same place Daniel once stood flipping through my mail like he owned the place. Show me everything, she said. I slid over the forged forms, the transfer request, and the VA cognitive assessments Rosa helped me gather. She studied each page with a tight-lipped focus. No reactions, no gasps, no "oh my God," just sharp clinical comprehension. After 10 minutes, she looked up. Your son has been laying groundwork, she said. This is no misunderstanding. I know. He wants control of all your accounts. I know. He's fabricating cognitive impairment. I know, I repeated, though this time my voice shook. And you've been pretending to play along. Yes. She paused. Then she did something unexpected. She smiled. Not a warm smile. A smile of respect. You're sharper than most clients I get, she said. This gives us an advantage. I leaned back in my chair. What do we do next? We document everything, every word he says, every visit, every attempt to help. And then, she tapped the forged signature. We give him enough rope to hang himself. What about the bank? I asked. I'll handle them, she said. They've already flagged his activity. Yes. Good. Then she asked the question I knew was coming. Do you want a criminal case or a civil one? I swallowed. Hard. Criminal meant handcuffs. Civil meant financial restitution. I don't want to destroy my son, I said quietly. You won't be, she replied. He's doing that himself, you're just protecting yourself. I stared at the documents in front of me. At my son's handwriting. At my forged signature. I want whatever stops him. Margaret nodded once, then we aimed for both. The next step, the next piece of the execution, came when Daniel returned 2 days later for another check-in. He didn't knock, again. He never knocked anymore. Dad, he called out, you home? I was sitting in my recliner, recorder already running beneath the cushion. In here. He walked in with fake concern pasted on his face. How have you been doing? Melissa said you seemed confused on the phone. She misunderstood, I said softly. He smiled sympathetically, the predator's smile. See, that's what worries me. You're forgetting conversations, dropping things. You didn't even remember the bank appointment last week. I remembered everything. He didn't know I'd frozen the account. Didn't know the bank flagged him. Didn't know Margaret had already drafted a protective order. But I let my shoulders slump. Let my eyes lose focus. I'm trying my best, I murmured. He sat down across from me, leaning forward. Dad, I'm doing this for your own good. I'm not trying to take anything from you. Click. Lie documented. You believe that, don't you? He pressed. I let a long pause stretch out before saying, I don't know anymore, son. He flinched just a little. He wasn't expecting resistance. Look, he said, I brought the forms again. We should finish signing today. He reached into his folder and slid the paperwork across the coffee table. The same forged packet, same lies, all wrapped in a neat little bow. Just sign here, he said gently. My hand trembled, not fake this time. I could feel the weight of what was happening pressing on my chest. I lifted the pen, held it between my fingers, stared at my name printed beneath the signature line. Dad, he urged softly, it's okay. I'll take care of everything. I lowered the pen, then let it slip from my hand. I'm sorry, I whispered. I don't understand all this. He sighed heavily, frustrated but masking it. I've explained it a dozen times. Explain it again, I said, just slower this time. He opened his mouth, irritation flickering across his face, but he launched back into the explanation. And he made his biggest mistake yet. He detailed the entire plan. How he'd take control of my accounts. How he'd manage my confusing finances. How he'd protect me from myself. Clicking, clicking, clicking. Each sentence was another shovel full of dirt onto his own grave. 3 days later, Margaret and I met at her office. Downtown, small suite, shelves stacked with legal texts and folders. I set the recorder on her desk. She pressed play. Daniel's voice spilled out, calm, confident, damning. Her expression didn't change. But when the recording clicked off, she said, "This is enough to begin proceedings." "What happens now?" I asked. "We move fast," she said, "very fast before he escalates." "What do you mean, escalates?" She folded her hands. When someone begins financial abuse and meets little resistance, they usually push further. More lies, more pressure, sometimes even attempts to declare incompetence formally. You think he'd go that far? She met my eyes. He already has. The next day, February 28th, the doorbell rang at 8:14 a.m. Daniel stood there holding a clipboard. My heart sank. He was dressed nicer than usual, dress shoes, button-down shirt, coat brushed clean. "Dad, we need to go," he said. "Go where?" I asked. "To a memory clinic," he said. "They can do a cognitive evaluation. It'll help with the paperwork." My blood ran cold. This was the escalation Margaret warned about. "I don't want to go," I said softly. "It's not optional," he said, voice firm. "You need this." He grabbed my coat from the hook, held it out. That's when I saw the glint in his eyes. Not concern. Determination. Possession. This wasn't about helping. This was about eliminating obstacles. He wanted a diagnosis to back his lies. He wanted a piece of paper that said I wasn't competent. He wanted legal ammunition. And he wanted it today. "Daniel," I said slowly, "what if I refuse?" He stared at me, cold, flat, unrecognizable. "Dad," he said, "you don't have the capacity to refuse." My heart stopped. For a moment it truly did. But before he could say anything else, before he could shove me toward the car, the front door opened behind him. Daniel turned and froze. Standing there, coat dusted with snow, file folder in hand, was attorney Margaret Chen. "Good morning," she said calmly. "I'm Harold Lawson's legal representative. This conversation is over." Daniel blinked. "Who the hell are you?" Margaret stepped forward, handing him a paper. "This is a notice of legal protection and an immediate cease and desist order regarding any attempt to obtain power of attorney." He stared down at it, confused. What is this?" Margaret adjusted her glasses. "It means if you attempt to move your father, access his accounts, coerce him, or pursue any medical evaluation without his consent, you'll be committing a felony." Daniel's face drained of color. I was just trying to help." She held up another sheet. "We also have recorded evidence that says otherwise." His eyes shot to me. "Dad, what did you do?" I finally stood up, slow, steady, the old pain in my knees overwhelmed by something stronger. "What I did," I said softly, "was stop pretending." Daniel's mouth fell open, but no words came out. Margaret stepped between us. "You need to leave now, and do not return without counsel." Daniel looked at her. At me. Back at her. His voice cracked. "You set me up." I shook my head. "No, son, you set yourself up. I just stopped getting out of your way." He stood there another moment, breathing hard, eyes flicking between anger and disbelief, before he finally backed out of the doorway. "Dad, you'll regret this," he whispered. I met his gaze. "No," I said quietly. "For the first time in months, I won't." He left without another word. The door shut. The execution had begun. You ever watch a man realize the ground under him isn't solid anymore? There's a look, part disbelief, part panic, part wounded pride. I saw that look on Daniel's face the moment Margaret handed him that cease and desist order. But here's the truth I didn't fully understand until the days that followed. A man doesn't fall all at once. He unravels, thread by thread. Daniel didn't come back that night. Didn't call. Didn't text. I sat in my recliner with the lights off, listening to the refrigerator hum, feeling the old house settle around me. My heart should have been pounding, but instead there was this strange stillness. For the first time in months, I felt safe enough to fall asleep without pretending to. The next morning, I woke to a voicemail. 11:02 p.m. Daniel's voice, shaky and trying to sound calm. "Dad, we need to talk. This lawyer, she's manipulating you. I never meant for things to go this far. Just call me, okay? Please." I saved the message. Didn't respond. By noon, there were 3 more. "Dad, you don't understand what you're doing. You're being confused by outside influence. We can fix this. Call me. Clicking, clicking, clicking. Each message, another piece of evidence. Margaret came by around 3 p.m. She walked in like she owned the place, confident, collected. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Tired," I said honestly, "but clear." "That's all we need." She sat down across from me. "Now here's where things shift. Up until today we've been defensive. From this point on we go on offense." I nodded slowly. "What does offense look like?" She opened her folder, sliding out a stack of forms. "We're filing for a restraining order, a guardianship challenge, and a financial protection action. With the recordings you've collected and the forged documents, your son is facing significant legal exposure." "Criminal?" I asked. "If necessary," she said, "but the goal is to stop him, not ruin him." I rubbed the bridge of my nose. "Margaret, my daughter Melissa, she shouldn't get dragged into the legal mess." "She won't," she said firmly, "but she may need to testify that you've been lucid, that you've been functioning independently." I nodded. "Melissa would do that, she'd do anything." Margaret paused, softened just a little. "You're not alone in this, Harold." It's strange how much weight those words carried. For months, I'd felt like a man living inside a dimming lighthouse, watching the shore grow darker and darker. Now, there was a beam cutting through again. Around 6 p.m., Melissa came by with a casserole she pretended was just an excuse to check in. "Dad," she said as she hugged me, "I heard from Daniel." "Of course you did," I said dryly. "He's scared," her voice faltered. "He said you blindsided him." I looked at her, really looked at her. "Honey, he forged my signature, tried to take my money, and he tried to get me declared incompetent." She blinked hard, jaw tightening. "I know, I guess I'm grieving the brother I thought I had." I squeezed her hand. "Me too." She nodded toward the recorder on the table. "Margaret says you may need more recordings." "I'm ready." "You sure?" "Melissa," I said quietly, "I've spent months pretending to be a man I'm not. Now I get to be myself again." Her eyes glistened. "Then I'm with you all the way." The unraveling truly began that night at 8:47 p.m. A knock on the door. Not frantic. Not aggressive. Just defeated. I opened it to find Daniel standing there. Same winter coat, same tired face, but something was different. He looked small. "Dad," he said, "can we talk?" I didn't answer. Just stepped aside, letting him walk in. He paced in front of the recliner, running both hands through his hair. "This lawyer, she's making things worse," he said. "I was trying to help you." "No," I said quietly, "you were trying to help yourself." He stopped pacing, staring at me like he didn't recognize who I'd become. "You've changed." "No," I replied, "I just stopped pretending." He swallowed. "Dad, I'm in trouble, you know that, right, if this goes to the police?" "That's up to you," I interrupted, "not me." He blinked, confused. "You made these decisions," I said. "You crossed the lines, you built this mess." He sank onto the sofa, rubbing his forehead. "Dad, I don't know how to fix this." A strange ache filled my chest. Not pity, not forgiveness, something older, sadder. "You start," I said, "by telling the truth." He looked up. I held his gaze. "Not to me," I added, "to them." He knew who them was. The bank. The legal aid office. Maybe even the police. His breath stuttered. "Dad, I could lose everything." "You almost took everything from me," I said softly. The words hung in the room like smoke. He didn't cry. Didn't yell. Didn't argue. He just folded. "I don't know who I am anymore," he whispered. "You will," I said, "one way or another." When Daniel finally left, the recorder had captured every word of the conversation, every admission, every half-truth, every slip. Margaret listened to it the next morning in her office. When it ended, she leaned back satisfied. "Mr. Lawson," she said, "your son is coming apart, and the legal foundation beneath him is collapsing." I let out a long breath. "What happens next?" I asked. She closed the folder gently. The fallout, she said, and the reckoning. The unraveling wasn't complete yet. But it had started. And once it starts, it never stops halfway. You'd think that after everything, after the forged signature, the lies, the recordings, the cease and desist order, there'd be some dramatic final showdown, a courtroom climax, a judge delivering a thunderous verdict. But real life doesn't wrap itself in neat little bows. Real justice is quieter, heavier, lonelier. It came in pieces for me, some welcome, some painful, all necessary. The final step began on March 10th, 2022, at exactly 9:03 a.m. when Margaret knocked on my door holding a slim folder and a thermos of coffee. "You're going to want to sit," she said. My knees already agreed with her. Good news or bad? Both. That's life, isn't it? The good and the bad always travel together. We sat at my kitchen table, same place where Daniel once rehearsed his lies, same place where I collected every scrap of my truth. Margaret opened the folder. "Daniel S. been questioned by the bank's fraud division," she said. "They confronted him with the forged signature and suspicious transfer requests." My chest tightened and he admitted enough to make our case airtight. I let out a slow breath I didn't realize I'd been holding for weeks. But Margaret wasn't done. The county prosecutor reviewed the evidence, the recordings, the forged forms, the attempted coercion. They're recommending charges. "Prison?" I asked quietly. She hesitated, "Potentially." I stared down at the worn surface of the table, the grooves from years of my wife's crossword pencils, the scratches from Daniel dragging his Lincoln logs across it when he was a kid, a whole life carved into the wood. "I didn't want that for him," I said. "I wanted him stopped, not ruined." Margaret nodded. "We have another option." I looked up. "He can enter a diversion program," she said. "Mandatory restitution, financial monitoring, counseling, and 3 years of no contact unless initiated by you." My throat tightened. "So he won't go to prison?" "Not if he cooperates." "He will." I said it with more certainty than I felt. Margaret folded her hands. "There's one thing left, Mr. Lawson. A statement, your statement. The court needs to hear whether you support diversion." I thought about that a long time. About Daniel as a boy with skinned knees. About Daniel as a man with empty eyes. About the months he spent turning my world into fog. "He's still my son," I finally said, "and he's still responsible. Both those things can be true." Margaret nodded. "I'll draft it." Daniel didn't call. Not after the meeting with the prosecutors. Not after the official notice went out. Not after the agreement was signed. But he did send a letter. It came in a plain envelope, his handwriting shaky, unfamiliar. I sat in my recliner to open it, my safe spot, the one place in the house that didn't lie to me. "Dad, I don't know why I did what I did. I'd like to say it was stress or bills or panic, but the truth is I saw an opportunity and I convinced myself you wouldn't notice or care. I was wrong. I'm sorry in a way I don't know how to put on paper. I understand if you never want to see me again. Daniel." No excuses. No pleading. Just the truth. I set the letter on my lap and stared at it for a long time. Not shaking. Not angry. Just tired. Melissa came by later and found me holding it. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded. "Yeah, I think I am." "You gonna write back?" "Not today," I said. "Maybe not tomorrow." "What about someday?" she asked softly. I folded the letter, "Someday still open." She hugged me then, long, warm, grounding. She smelled like laundry detergent and hope. "You didn't deserve any of this," she whispered. I closed my eyes. Not everything in life is about what we deserve. The months that followed were quiet. Peaceful even. Spring thawed the yard. Birds returned to the maple tree out back. I fixed up the shed like I'd always planned. I even took that fishing trip with Steve before he moved. Every once in a while, I'd think about Daniel, not the man who tried to take my money, but the boy who used to fall asleep on my chest during Brown's games. Memories funny like that. It doesn't erase the good just because something bad came later. But I also kept the recordings, the paperwork, the evidence, not out of spite, out of survival. Because when you're an old man in America, you learn something the hard way. Trust needs to be earned, even from family. Especially from family. And the truth, I'm not sure Daniel will ever fully earn it again. But he's still out there, working, repaying what he tried to steal, moving through counseling, rebuilding piece by piece. And I suppose that's its own kind of justice. A month ago, I sat on the porch at sunset, a blanket over my legs, the sky burning orange behind the rooftops. Melissa was beside me, sipping iced tea. She asked, "Dad, do you ever regret how you handled it?" I didn't answer right away. Regret's a heavy word. It needs space. Finally, I said, "I regret that it had to happen, not how I handled it." "Why?" she asked. I looked at my hands, old, lined, spotted, but steady. "Because if I hadn't protected myself," I said, "there wouldn't have been anything left of me for anyone to love, including him." She took my hand. "You're the strongest man I know." I shook my head. "No, I'm just an old man who refused to disappear." The sun dipped behind the houses. The light faded. But inside me, something stayed lit. Not anger. Not triumph. Just this quiet, stubborn truth. He thought my dementia was real. The $68,000 trap was. And the man he tried to erase. I'm still here.